Okay, welcome back, everyone, to our DV class masterclass. Now it's the third track. That's procedural relational command, hosted by Carlos. So, Carlos, are you ready?
I am. If
Okay.
you wouldn't mind stopping your screen sharing, and I'll share mine.
Okay, here you go.
Thank you. And good presentation, by the way. It was very interesting with the Kafka.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're going to be a tough act to follow, but I have a pretty cool topic. So the procedural relational command is really interesting. It's the procedural relational command allows you to call a stored procedure as if it were a view, so you can pass parameters to it. So it doesn't sound very useful, except that some tools just don't have a good way of allowing you to call a stored procedure. So Power BI is one of those where calling a stored procedure in Power BI is fantastic, easy to do if you're using Microsoft SQL Server. If you're not using Microsoft SQL Server, I spent a couple hours trying to get it to work and I just could not. And the cool thing now is that the new technology here inside of DV, you can call the stored procedures if it were a view. So how does this work? So right now I am using a data set from Facebook here. And if I change one of the parameters and I apply it, what this is doing is internally, Power BI thinks it's calling a view. So it makes it very easy to add in filters and more slicers here. And you don't have to write custom code in order to call that stored procedure. So it's pretty slick. So it doesn't look very impressive right now. It looks like just a very boring dashboard. But let's go take a look on the internals. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start looking at a stored procedure, a very simple stored procedure here. And I'm going to edit this. And we can see here that it's a very simple procedure, right? You input a string. It's limited to 512 characters. The default is foo. And what it's going to return is a big integer, and it's going to generate the hash code of this. Very straightforward, very simple. So if I do generate a select statement, right, and we're going to just call this right now with just string. And what it's going to do is it's going to pass that into the stored procedure, and it's going to generate the hash code, right? And we see that this is truly working. And we're going to go back here, and we're going to append or prepend something to it. We're going to say hash, and we're going to put that in, and we're going to concatenate, right? Okay. So now we have this. We've committed this to our data virtuality. Without return. Oh, did not like that. Interesting. Okay, let's just
It's
stick with
big
the
integer.
classic.
It's big because it's big integer, Carlos.
Oh,
You
you're
probably
absolutely
want to
right.
do you want to do string.
Thank you. There we go. So now let's alter this procedure, and let's call this one more time. And now we're going to see our new result here. Okay, so far this is pretty straightforward. This is what we've been doing in data virtuality now for a while. So the interesting thing comes in the following, right? If I were to try to call this from Power BI, Tableau, I was able to call a stored procedure and pass parameters to it. It was a little convoluted, but it was okay. In Power BI, I found it very difficult. If someone knows any tips or tricks, please send us an email. I would love to hear more about it. So what I need to do next in order to get this to work is I need to create a wrapper view on this. So if you were around previously for the discussion on OData, you would have seen some of the new wrappers that we have. So in here, I am going to look at this view. Oh, where did I put it? Here we go. So if you noticed, previously hashed was a big integer and I just changed it to a string, right? So our definition is our metadata has changed. And also, if you begin looking at this is a little bit different than our typical views, right? Our normal views, the way we're accustomed to them previously, look like this, right? But in order to be able to call these with parameters, data virtuality needs to know the additional metadata associated with this. And what we're doing here is we're passing in a string as a parameter, and then we're getting the hash value out, right? So this part is really important. So let me combine these two right here in a single window so we can see this, right? And we can see we have a mismatch, right? I changed the type from big integer to string. So we're going to have to fix this in just a little bit. And so you can see here, string corresponds to this data type or the input value. We added a default value, and we'll see a little bit later on why this is useful and why it's good practice to do this. And it returns the hash value. So we're saying here that the structure of this view is augmented, right? We have the string and we have hashed. String is the item that we passed in, and hash value is what's returned from the stored procedure. Okay, so here, let's go fix this right now. Let's turn this into a string. And let's do that right there. And the next thing I want to do is I have a code snippet already here. So let's open that up, and I don't need the first line. It's really just a placeholder for me for the demo. So what we're going to do now is we're going to call the view and we're going to pass in string as a parameter. We're going to see what the result is. So it's okay. So we have the original parameter here, food F, and now we see the new hash value. So if we change this, let's just say it's foo, and we execute this, we can see that the parameter is being passed in. So if there's, and it may look like we're just doing a little bit of clever filtering, but so let's use our previous syntax here, right? So this is how we normally call stored procedures in data virtuality, this line right here, right? The param value is actually coming from right here, and hashed is what's being returned by our stored procedure. So let's go look at hashed again. And we can see that when we call this, our return value is hashed, right? And if we look at the definition of the stored procedure, we can see that hashed is part of our return table, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to combine this, right? We're going to do union all just to compare and make sure that this is really working, right? So if I change this again and I say food and I run this, you can see that it's returning the exact same thing. And the difference is that this is being called as a view, right? And the parameter is being passed in, and in using the where clause to pass the parameter in. We could also do filtering, and we could also say, in addition to passing in the parameter, we could say where hashed is like %44 and %, right? So we're just going to look at, we're going to filter to make sure it has 2 4s in there, and we're going to run this, and we'll see this worked. So now let's change the string. Oh, that also had a 4 in it. So didn't expect that. There we go. So now what we're seeing is this first one didn't return any data at all, right? Let's double check that. So not only can you pass in parameters, but you can also pass in additional filters that are going to be applied to the where clause, right? So if your tool has difficulty in calling a stored procedure, this is a great feature because it will help you be able to build more sophisticated visualizations with your tool, right? In this example, we're going to be using Power BI, right? And what I've done, what has been done here is the ability to call the Facebook API, which, if you're familiar with it, is mostly stored procedures, right? So if we go to Facebook, the data virtuality connector, you can see that the vast majority of things here are stored procedures, right? We have our ad accounts. Right? And let's move this over and close out the other ones because we just don't need these anymore. So let's close out the windows to the right. And we can see that these are our accounts, and these are the account IDs that we would be passing in to the stored procedure. And as you can see here, I mean, the most of the data that we want to get to, they're all stored procedures, right? And since we have difficulty calling these stored procedures from Power BI, this feature is just fantastic. So here, if I change the ad and hit apply, we can see the results. Right now, the results are cached, so it looked pretty quick. But if I were to change this to level, which I have not done previously, and click apply, now we can see here how this is going to take a little bit more time to execute. And we're doing the same thing as if we were calling the stored procedure directly, because we're using.
Carlos, 1 second.
Yes.
Can you elaborate? Can you go back to this Power BI? Because I think that was really quick about the what you were changing there. So the level is not actually a filter, or so what is the level really?
The level is a parameter in the stored procedure, and we are accessing it as if it were a slicer. So if we go to our model here, we can see that we have our marketing insights, right? And this is actually a stored procedure. So we have a view wrapper around it, and we are the parameters account ID level, which we can see down here. These are all parameters to this stored procedure, right? So remember, marketing insights, we're going to go look at the stored procedure in Facebook, in the Facebook connector. So I'm going to look for marketing, and we have marketing insights, and we can see here that we have a large number of parameters, right? Both as inputs and as results, right? So here, what we're doing is we're defining other tables or views, right? And we're going to use these as slicers.
Perfect.
So for ad accounts, we have a list here, an array, and we're going to have this as a dropdown. We're going to be able to select our account ID. We have our level values, and we have our dates. And all of these are presented as if they were a view with with relational dependencies with other tables. So in other tools, one of the things that I would have to do in another tool, or if I wanted to work around, would be I would simply have 3 unrelated slicers, right? That would have no relationship to the call to the stored procedure. I would have to write my own code to get the values that we selected in the slicer. I would have to read this value here, and read this value, and then generate my stored procedure call, send that to data virtuality, and then get the results and display it here. So the nice thing about this is it's saving me quite a few steps, right? By treating this as a view, I can simply define my relationships. And once I have my relationships defined, I can easily define my slicers. And once I have the slicers, then I can simply select these and apply it. This one is not going to return any information. It doesn't have any, but just so you can see how this is being applied and how it works. And we'll go through and we'll actually recreate this Power BI dashboard and query from scratch. So let me go back to the one that we do have data for. And let me try ad set. I haven't tried ad set yet, so let's check that out. And it's still running. And this usually takes about 30 seconds to a minute to retrieve the data from Facebook. One, because my internet connection is slow. And again, we're querying quite a distance and we're asking for an aggregation of quite a bit of data. So let's go through and begin looking at this a bit more, right? So our goal is to be able to call marketing insight stored procedure as if it were a view, right? So let's take a quick look at the stored procedure itself. Let's generate a call to it. As you can see here, we can see here the level and we can see the valid values. Right? We can see we have the campaign ID and the account ID here. And so we have a lot of information that we want to pass to it. And we could potentially have a lot of slicers. So what we're going to do now is we're going to wrap this stored procedure in another stored procedure. I know, sounds a little odd, but bear with me. And the reason we're going to do this is here's our wrapper. And let me edit this procedure. So here comes the interesting thing, right? Here's our original call to the stored procedure. And we define our parameters, same as before. The other thing is that we're also adding a couple of defaults here. Right, so these will become important in just a little bit. And the reason, if you have some values that you would like to put as a default, this is a great place to put them inside your stored procedure wrapper. And also it's important to do this if you need to do any sort of data type conversion. This is also a good place to put it, right? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, there's also, I think, the challenge of not being able to overload procedures in our stored procedure language, right?
Correct. So
So
you have to
go ahead.
recreate the wrapper either with a different name or place it in a different schema, which is what we did here. The other interesting thing is because we added default values, a lot of these, for example, daily, we have it set to default to false. And it's something that we don't actually use here. We don't see any slicer here allowing us to change between the daily true and false values, right? And for level, we have a campaign that is the default. And the nice thing about this is it's important to have defaults because if you're using this as a view, right? Let's go back one. If you're using, oh, I just missed it. Here we go. We just had this a little while ago and I think I closed it. Let me go back to it. Here we go. I only have one single parameter here, really, and I have one output. So if I call this, right, without the where clause, it would either typically fail or throw an exception, but it'll succeed because the default value is foo, right? So when I created this over here, hash string, I put in a default value of foo. So this is one of the use cases and an important detail that if your tool might omit the where clause, right, for a particular value, or if a particular slicer is optional, these are all required, right? So I made it easy for myself. But if you have a scenario where your slicer is optional, then you're going to want to put in a default value for that parameter, right? Like we did here for daily. So any questions so far? No? Okay, it sounds like we don't have any questions. If at any point you do have a question, please feel free to ask me at the moment. There's no need really to wait until the end. Okay, so far we've covered, we have a quick demo here of calling a stored procedure as a view. And over here, we looked at our original function and we looked at our wrapper function. And the next thing that we need to do now is we need to wrap the wrapper function with a view wrapper. So this is our view wrapper. So this is where it gets interesting. So here, again, we're using this new extended syntax, right? So this is normally what our views would look like inside of data virtuality. But here we have the extended metadata. And if we look here, this part corresponds to our, close that. Hopefully I won't need it. So if we look here, we have account ID all the way down to preview. And the other thing that we did here in our stored procedure wrapper was to rename any duplicate values, right? So normally in our stored procedures, for returning the account ID, we simply use the same name. But this would cause problems when we're creating our view. So when you create your stored procedure wrapper, renaming this to say ID out is required, right? So we're going to look here and we're going to look, we have account, and these are all in alphabetical order. But if we have, you can see account ID out. Here it starts here. And then we have our original parameters down here, which is account ID all the way down to preview. So let's flip back quickly, right? We have account ID to preview. These are our input parameters, and our output parameters begin at account ID out all the way down to adds action stats, right? So if we go back here, we can see our output parameters, account ID out, all the way down to action stats, and these are the input parameters here. So data virtuality, once you've done this part, data virtuality handles the automatic passing of the parameters and reading the output for you, right? And when you run this query, it is going to return everything as if this view had returned all of these columns, right? Let's take a look at that. So let's go back here and let's generate a view. And I am missing a couple of parameters here. I'm missing the account ID and I'm missing the level. The level does default. So this is also a nice thing about having defaults is that you can run your views just like this without having to worry about making sure you have all your parameters. And it really helps for the testing, right? And it makes it a lot easier to run unit tests on this if you have your default parameters set up. So again, querying information from Facebook is a little slow, so we'll come back to this in just a little bit. And now we're going to begin building a new Power BI workbook, and we're going to be calling this view here, and we're going to be passing in the parameters. So let's open up a new Power BI. Are there any questions so far? I know this is it's a lot of information to take in. Everyone on the same page? Any questions? Something not clear? Please let me know. Okay. Good. We have a question. Nice. A comment. Oh, that's even nicer. Thank you.
It's nice. They're still following. Yeah, so it's good.
That's great.
Good stuff
That's
you're
great.
showing.
Yeah. So what I want to do here is I want to use the native ODBC connector for data virtuality. Right. So let's look for data virtuality. Right here, I'm going to use the connector. And my server is called, it's a VM on my machine. So Carlos's workstation, and it's running version 9 of CentOS. The database is going to be data virtuality. And I'm going to start out with direct query mode. Okay, most of the things that we're going to be reading are going to be in import mode, but it's easier to change things from direct query to import than it is to go the other way. So definitely recommend starting with direct query. So now we just click OK. I need to open up my edit. And I'm missing port 35432, I think is the correct port.
No, I think
This
is
is the
3 for SSL and 2 for non-SSL.
okay, I want non-SSL. So I think this is correct. So it's also the same port that you find here. I'm going to disconnect from DV for a second. Oh no, this is the wrong
That's
port.
the JDBC one. Yeah, yeah.
That's JDBC. It's the ODBC one. Yeah,
This one, yeah,
easily.
here.
Too many BDCs everywhere. So if we look, it's the same port here. And by adding it here after the colon, I'm forcing it to attempt to connect to a non-SSL port. So I'll click OK. And this time it's going to work. Perfect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Facebook. If we go back here, and I need to connect again. Just wait for this to connect. I want to make sure I have everything correctly configured. I also want to explain a little bit about how I'm doing this and where I'm getting the information from. And again, if you didn't notice, I'm running a nightly build. So if anything goes wrong, just everyone just run for the doors. So the one I want is the Facebook schema, right? This is where I have my view right here. Okay, we can close out the ODBC connector. And I have the Facebook, I have the dates, I have the level values, and the marketing insights, the one I want. So one thing we didn't look at the dates. And if we can see here, it is a very simple query to get the start dates. All right, so let's just run it. And we have here our list of dates. And if we go back, we can see the level values. This is very simple. We got this out of the definition of marketing insights. So if we go back to here, we can see marketing insights. And when we look for level, we got the magic values from the description. So the magic values are campaign, ad set, and ad. Is this one? No, that one. Here we go. Yeah. And again, here when we're doing this, we're also specifying the metadata here. And if we look here, where it's not needed, but it's always a good thing, especially with strings, to limit the size of the strings. And the reason is Power BI or one of your other tools is going to read and see that it is string. And when data virtuality passes in strings, let's go over here and take a look. You can see that our string type for marketing insights has a max size. I think that's 2 gigabytes. So you can imagine the tool in the Power BI in this example, trying to allocate or attempting to allocate enough memory for each of those parameters. But in reality, the strings are small. They're less than 20 characters. So we want these. Oh, go ahead.
One remark, yeah. And usually this is not a problem, right? If you're dealing with databases like Postgres, you can have a very long definition of a varchar or a string field, and it's not populated. But already, if you're, for example, dealing with MySQL and you're replicating data there, then you have a limitation of the length for a line. So for us, it's not a problem. But we see again that it's for Power BI, for MySQL, I know. So sometimes you run into these challenges of the large data types. This is why this was very important. I want to stress that also, that it's very important and very good to have signatures for views so that everyone knows basically what to expect in terms of the data size. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, Matthias. So here I just clicked on load after we selected our 3 tables. Again, these are the 3 tables, the 3 views that we have here in Facebook schema. Let's go back. It is now evaluating all of these, reading the data. And again, this is going to take a little while. Some of the things that happened here are that the Facebook query and, well, the data, it takes a little while to query, and it takes usually around anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute. So right now, Power BI has loaded all the information, and it's going to be creating the model here. And we have this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create our relationships. So I'm going to look for level here. Thankfully, they're sorted. So I'm going to join these here. And the cardinality is many to one. And again, this is going to take a little while. If
So
you have
to validate this, it's retrieving all the data from Marketing Insights to just to validate this, right? So that is a
yes.
challenge, but yeah, it didn't cache it.
So let me just skip this and oh, there we go. So one of these, it's actually a one-to-one. Oh no, it's no, that's correct. Sorry. I think this is backwards though. It's supposed to be, let me double check that. Yeah, it's backwards. I have it backwards for some reason. Okay. Try this again. And take level, drag it here. Okay, many to one. Okay. Skip this. Okay, perfect. Same thing here. We're going to do this. We're going to look at our original one. In this date here, let's look at the properties. And this one is related to our, there we go, our start date. So we're going to look for our start date, and we're going to combine, and we're going to perform the join here. One to many. Skip the validation. And we're missing one more table here. So if we look here at our original, we have the level values, we have the ad accounts, and apparently the ad accounts did not get added. Unless it's behind one of these. No. Add related tables. Okay, we're just going to use it with this one. Oh. 1 second. Let me try one more thing.
Okay.
New
Plus
table.
for the tables, or would that be a new sheet of relations?
I think that's a new sheet.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that didn't work. New table, manage relationships.
Or get data again? But
Yeah, possibly.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's
because you could lose everything. No, it's a high stake, Carlos.
It is. Okay, so let's try new here. No, this is the relationships. Okay, not what I want. I want Power BI quarter data source settings. Let me double check this real quick. Okay, no encryption basic. Okay, that's correct. That's correct. I'm not sure why it didn't load
Calling all
the.
Power BI experts,
Yes.
you can send us in Q&A how to add another table once we missed that.
Okay, so we're going to call it good enough for now.
We got
And
default
because it,
values. That's the reason for default values as well.
yes. So, and actually, we're going to go through and change this too, because as we can see, really, we only have one default value that we really use, and it's this one right here. So this one I am going to hard code. I'll just copy that out in Notepad. So it's 6411075 and 13751. Okay. So let's go back and fix this. Go to our stored procedure, marketing insights. We're going to edit the stored procedure. And this is the account ID, which is going to be the input. Let's double check that. And the account ID should be right here. Okay. So again, this is the input. So it was at the end. And we're going to add the default here. Account ID long. Default. We're going to add that in. So execute. Again, like Matthias mentioned, the importance of having defaults. And what we're going to do here is just have, instead of having 3 slicers, I'm not sure why I missed the other table. But I'm going to add 2 slicers here. Oops. And one thing I forgot to do. So here we want to change the data, method. So previously we had these all as direct query, but since we're using these as slicers, it's not really necessary to have these as a direct query. And it's actually just faster to use this as a cached or extracted data set. So we're going to go here and we're going to go to advanced properties. And that's not where I need to go. Let me double check. I think it's just properties. Oh, I just had this. Here we go. There we go. So in the source, we're changing this to import. Ignore this. Don't do this because we need the marketing insights to be a direct query, or else it'll just read all the data and cache it, and it's not what we want. So we go here. Let's select this one. Let's go to our source, edit settings, and we're going to change this to import. Click OK. And this one, we go back. Let's double check this, edit settings, and we can see this one is still direct query. Okay, so this is exactly what we want. Let's close this. And pending changes. So it is now importing the data for the dates and the levels. Oh, perfect. Let's go back here and let's add our slicer. So our first one, let's see how we have it set up just so that we follow the same format. So the first one we have is the level. Okay, so this one we're going to set as the level, and we're going to add that here. And we now have this, and we're going to go over here and we're going to make a couple of changes. I want this to be a drop down, and I also want this to, oh, what was it? List, and is that it? No. List. 1 second, I need more options. Okay. Okay, good. It's doing single value. We're going to add one more slicer. Whoops, I added a table. So now I'm going to add one more slicer here, and I'm going to drag this up here. And this is going to be my dates. Select that. And this one again, I want this to be a drop down. And I want this to be some of the properties here. Whoops. Oh, 1 second. I just had this the other day. Okay, let's do it as a list. There we go. Perfect. Okay, and now what I want to do is deselect all of these. I'm going to add a table. Expand that out. And this one, I'm going to select a couple values here. I'm going to say the accounting ID. This shouldn't really be aggregated, but we're not going to fix that right now. We want maybe the ad name, the CPP, the CPM, and the CPC. And also let's look at the country. And okay, so these are all the fields, values that we want. And the other thing we want to do is go to the options, because one of the things I liked about this other sheet is that we had an apply, right? And I really like the apply button here. So let's go back. Now let's go to options. And oops, I clicked on the wrong one. Okay, options. And we're going to go to options here. And we're going to go all the way down to query reduction and add an apply button to each of the slicers. And we're going to click OK. Let me double check this one. Okay, that's all good. There we go. So now I'm going to say an ad. I'm going to click apply. And it's running right now. And we should see new data in just a second. You can see here the new data, and it's aggregated based on the values here. So one of the things that really doesn't make any sense is aggregating the account ID. So we can go through, let's see if this works. And nope, I am not going to fill with this because I just don't know Power BI well enough. So we're just going to leave it as is for now before I accidentally break something. So again, this is one of the options here. Let's pick a Wednesday. And now we can apply this, and we can see that this is refreshing. And I think I went a little too fast here, but these are the steps to allow calling stored procedures using a syntax similar to that of a view. And I hope it was clear what the advantages are and how this can be leveraged in other tools.
Yeah, Carlos, it
yes.
is really awesome, and I also add my 10 cents here. So it's not only about Power BI; it's also especially, for example, tools like Looker, who also just or not just, but they rely on a database to where they can get data from, right? And these tools have a driver for data virtuality. I mean, all of them, the big ones, Tableau, Power BI, and Looker. All are partners for us, and we enable them, right? We enable them because there is some data. Nowadays, of course, you want everything to be in a data lake, or that this is a direction that many of the people are going. You could probably do this with Facebook data, but we can see here, if you look at all the iterations of what you can do, it's probably yeah, you need to store a lot of data in order to do this to really store all of the combinations that are possible here. And then there are also microservices where this data um, is not or is changing all the time, right? So you click refresh next time, and then you get new data. So especially when dealing with architectures like microservices, and you want to put them together with a dashboard and integrate data at the same time, I think this is a very strong feature that Carlos was illustrating. So I've been using and demoing, especially for Looker, this relational procedural command. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you. So any questions so far? Can I see a raise of hands if it was clear, or if there are any, everyone's good to move on? Ah, perfect. I got one. Good enough. I'll take it. So this kind of wraps up the putting it together part. So now let's talk about some of the limitations. This is currently, the procedural relational commands are currently in our build. It's in an alpha stage. And I'd mentioned several times that I was using a nightly build in order to perform the demo. And it's one of these features that's going to be released probably for general availability. Probably, I would guess, around 3.1. It's going through additional testing, and there are other things, limitations that we need to take care of. So also, I'd like to take this pause at this moment to thank Anya, our tier 3 support engineer, who did a lot of this presentation, a lot of the groundwork. So thank you, Anya. Some of the obstacles here, Power BI and other tools are going to have problems handling the long strings. And we talked about this before, that when you write your wrappers, to limit the size of the string so that the tool doesn't have to allocate so much memory, right? Also, another problem too is the where clause. So if the strings are very, very long, we're going to run into a couple problems where if you're trying to filter, if your where clause are paragraphs of text, it's going to require a lot more memory and a lot more resources in order to process that, right? So if you do have a database or something like that, you do have very, very long blocks of text that you need. I would recommend probably either hashing or using the hash code, or possibly doing a like on these. The other thing too is when we looked at this data, right, we're not just limited to filtering on the input parameters, right, and putting those in the where clause. We can just as easily, here we have all of these output parameters that you can also filter on, right? So when you're writing this view, here we go, view 500, I'm going to stop this for now. And we know that our input parameters start at account ID right here, right? And they go all the way to preview. So these are input parameters. So whenever we use one of these, right, in a where clause, what we're doing is we're supplying an input parameter. And we can also use the output parameters. So say, for instance, this, and gender is null, right? We wanted to see how many people have not completed their profile, perhaps. We wanted to see how many where this is null. Or we can say we want a particular campaign name, right? And we're going to say that it is a campaign name that has awesome as part of the name, right? So we can see here, we've broken this down into input parameters and where clause filters. So you can combine the two. Also, if you needed more than one account ID, you could also do something like this, right? Whoops, that's an or. There we go. You can also do something like this. One of the current limitations, though, that we have, and it causes problems with some of our tools, is when we try to do things like this. So let's comment this out. And we're going to say account ID in 1,4, right? So some of the tools when you're doing a select or a multi-select on these, if it generates the where clause like this, it currently doesn't work, and it's something we're aware of, but please know about the limitations here. This syntax works. So if you can control how it's generated by your tool, this is definitely the one to currently use.
But Carlos, what would you what would we expect in that case, right? Is that like a union of calling both of them?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would call the stored procedure twice with the permutation of those values.
Yeah, okay, but it's a long. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so no, I mean it is a fantastically cool feature, and I'm glad you brought that up, right? So it's going to give you something like this, right? An error like this. But if we do it the other way around, okay, hopefully this works. Okay, there we go. So, and that account ID doesn't work. And I don't remember what the account IDs are. I should have done level. So let's do level here. This one is easier for me to do. And we're going to do add and campaign. I'm pretty sure those have data in them. Hopefully I spelled that correctly. Okay, I think so. So again, this is going to take a few moments, right? Because what it's going to go through is going to make two calls, because the stored procedure itself doesn't really accept an array of values, right? So if we go back here to marketing insights, we can see that level is a single string. It doesn't accept an array of values, right? So internally, what data virtuality is doing is making multiple calls, and it did not work. Oh, that's because that filtered out the gender and that. Okay, let's do that again. So it's making two calls to the Facebook API and is automatically handling those permutations for you. So it is very slick. I at first I didn't really appreciate it until I started playing around more with it. So I'm quite impressed. And again, we talked previously about having to modify and build wrappers around things. So, here we go. Perfect. Okay, we can see now. Let's find the level. This should be over here, just past it. Pretty sure I saw it here someplace. Start date. Okay, account. Let's see if I can see this quickly here. Here we go, the level. So we can see here that we have half the data is campaign and the other half is ad, right? So it's pretty slick, right? It automatically handled making multiple calls and performing the union of that data, right? So really slick. And to help you out, we know this is tedious. I mean, we did it ourselves, and we kind of went through and wrote and had to write these, and so we already have some wrappers for you. These are courtesy of Anya. And these here, you can see that it really is like SQL code. So you can specify your source schema, your source procedure name, your target schema, and your target procedure name. And this will automatically create the wrapper for you. So if we go through and let's do this as a select statement. And we're going to use this one right here as our source. And on the procedure, again, let's do marketing actions this time. And not what I wanted. Let's try that again. Copy name. No, that does not want to work today. Again, I'm using a beta build, so bear with me here. There we go. I'll do it this way. Get the name. And I'm going to keep the same name. I'm just going to change the schema. So you can see the one up top, Facebook DV, corresponds to our Facebook connector, and Facebook up here is the destination where we put our wrapped stored procedures. Right. So we just run this and wait for it to finish. We currently have 2 of these, which is just marketing insights and test 1. And this one should have finished by now. So let's refresh. See what we have. Ah, there we go. Oh, this is another one that doesn't actually create it. It just creates the text for you. So we come back here and we can see here exactly what it built. Right. And format this. And run it. And you can see here that it used the default of 256. And it looks like we have a bug in the generation. And we'll get that taken care of a bit later. Not sure where the issue is. But we do have wrappers, and these wrappers will perform additional testing before we hand them off to you. And we also have another one to wrap the stored procedure in the view, right? And that includes the input parameters and the output parameters, including the renaming. So that brings us to a close, really. I've kind of touched on all the topics. Not sure how we're doing on time, Matthias. Do I have more
perfect.
time or?
Yes,
No,
you
it's
have.
perfect.
Excellent.
You have, but I think it's good to wrap up. But what did you want to show?
Actually, I wanted to take more questions. I was wondering if anybody had any questions.
If there's any questions, let's answer them. And I think then it's time to wrap it up, because this was very, very heavy stuff. Now everyone is probably everyone's head is kind of smoking now. So yeah, let us know, guys, if there guys and girls, if there are any questions. And if not, then let's wrap it up.